Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I am your host, Perry. I'm flying solo this week, boys. Got no co-host, but I do have a really good interview that's coming up for you with Jay from the Whiskey Raiders, also known as Take Whiskey Reviews. And I'm really excited for you all to check out that interview. If you're new here, welcome. Please go ahead and subscribe if you have not yet. Please also leave a rating and a review. We read those out here on the show, positive or negative sometimes. But it is a great way for us to reach new people and new potential listeners for the podcast. So yes, please do that. You can find our glassware at whiskeyambitions.com. You just search for This Is My Bourbon Drinking Glass, and you will find our Glencairns right there. Super easy. And patreon.com is where you can become a supporter of the show for as little as $1 a month. But at $5 a month, you get all of our backlogged catalog, yeah, like our last call, which comes out the day after every episode, our pregame chats, which come out the day before. I know I said those backwards, but it is what it is. You know how it goes. Yeah, we got a bunch of bonus episodes back there as well that have come out over the years. So go and check that out. Patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast for as little as $1 a month. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch it on over to the interview just because of how excited I am. You guys are really going to enjoy this. Had an awesome time getting to sit down with Jay, and I'm really looking forward to getting to do it again sometime in the near future. All right, that's it. Y'all enjoy the episode. Let go. I am incredibly excited. And you know what? I realize that I say that a lot when I have guests on that I'm excited about, but I can't help it. This is super cool. We were able to meet each other at the Repeal Day Expo, which was hosted by Fred Minnick back in December. This is Jay, also known as, and it is pronounced Take, right?
Yeah, nailed it.
Okay, cool. Because it's one of those things where I was like, maybe it's t8ke or something, but no, it's
not alone.
Good to know that I'm the same. I have some of the same problems as other people. Jay, he is also rather a writer for Whiskey Raiders now on the interwebs, as it were. Jay, welcome to the show, man. I'm super happy to get to sit down with you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on and taking the time. And it's hard to believe that Repeal Day Expo was like 3 months away already. It feels like we were just dancing it up moments ago.
Literally 3 months ago, which is just, when you messaged me first, you were like, I can't believe that it's already, and like it was at the beginning of January, and you're like, holidays just absolutely knocked me out. And like, yeah, I feel that on a very personal and deep, meaningful degree. Like, as soon as the first of the year kicks off, it's like, I don't know, I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants at that point. And you know, and I'm not one of those people to either go like, oh, just another day, another dollar or whatever. But, you know, like you get into the routine and you're like, it's, you know, I basically know what today is going to hold. And you're like, and it all just flies by so quickly. And, you know, there's also bourbon involved in there somewhere too. But that's different conversation. But Jay, I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself to the listeners, talk about some of your endeavors, as well as just why you're doing this thing, man. Why put yourself out like this?
No, it's fun. I appreciate you having me on. For the folks at home, I go by Jay. My username across the internet is Take, so t8ke. I'm the managing editor and spirits critic for whiskeyraiders.com. Raiders like Raiders of the Lost Ark, so RAIDRS.
Rad.
And I mean, that's my favorite movie, so I was like, I'm throwing this reference out there every time I get.
It's at least top 10 for me.
I'll take it. I mean, if it's on TV, I'll never not stop what I'm doing to watch it.
Absolutely.
Which is like 100%. A top 10 hallmark for me. But so I'm the managing editor and spirits critic there. We're basically the Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey. So, you know, all the work I do, writing reviews, writing articles, aggregating bottles. If you're looking for reviews, information about whiskey, that is definitely the place to go. And we have all the other big boys of bourbon hanging out there and getting their voice in as well. So that's like my primary gig. On top of that, I do, good Lord, there's so many other things, but moderator for Our Bourbon, which is, I think as of today, 174,000.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's gotten really big. It feels like just 6 months ago that we were at 100K, but we're almost at 200K. I'm gonna run the barrel program there. Yeah. And beyond that, I'm the founder of Aficionados Group, which is a group that picks spirits that aren't whiskey. So brandy, agave, rum, and all that kind of fun stuff. So those three big things tied together kind of make up my presence on the internet. But Whiskey Raiders is number one.
I want to give everybody the kind of the clue into what r/bourbon is too, just in case there's somebody who might not know. That is basically the main page for bourbon on Reddit.
Exactly.
And that's where everybody goes for, they see the reviews and they see, people complaining about the market and the industry as it is right now. But first off, kudos to you for even considering being a moderator in the hellscape that is Reddit. I mean, I love Reddit. I really do. It's a fun place to go and kill a couple hours. But at the same time, it is like bottom feeder central for some of the people who lurk around there. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody, but at the same time, like I'm not talking about the r/bourbon community. I'm talking about Reddit as a whole. Reddit as a whole is just, I'm not even going to go too much further, but how did you get into that? Did you actually start the r/bourbon?
Actually. So I think I'm technically speaking, even though I've been around for 5 years now, I think I'm the most recent mod. So,
cool.
Which is kind of fun in its own story. I started like everyone else. I was a contributor, and for sure, Reddit is not for people with thin skin, but I like to think that the bourbon community is on the more welcoming side of things. Actually,
absolutely. Yeah.
I wrote for a really, really long time, and I moderated a really big other community known as Scotch Swap for a long time. And that was where people could exchange bottles and samples. And that took a ton of work because, everyone got flared. Every time someone got a swap, you had to update their flare. There was a lot of like crisis resolution. There was a lot of like orchestration and like kind of logistics management. And then in the spring of 2018, when Reddit brought on a bunch of venture capital, they decided that some of those gray area subreddits like Scotch Swap or Gun Deals or some of the others were maybe a little more gray area than they cared to deal with. So unfortunately, what I think would have been the right way is they could have warned people that like, hey, in 30 days, your community is going to go away. But because Reddit's Reddit, they decided that when faced with the smart decision and the absolute dumbest decision, they like pulled a Leroy Jenkins and they went for the dumbest decision. So they banned the subreddit. I found out at the exact time as the entire community, which was unfortunate because I was in a meeting at the time and I had I got 75 private messages probably in the first 10 minutes. So, I'm in a meeting and my phone is just like jackhammering off the table.
What was the fallout like that for you? I mean, in some regard, there is a level of honor that has to be upheld, right?
Yeah.
With making sure that everybody does get the samples that they were promised in the swap. But how much of a headache was that as you were trying to pick up the pieces from?
Honestly, so the worst part too is that Reddit went. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Like nuclear almost feels a little bit too soft, but like nuclear works out. At that point, there was literally no way for us to pick up the pieces. There was no way to tell who had sent stuff, who hadn't sent stuff. There was like the subreddit was dead. Private messages were dead. They were rolling through people's inboxes. Like actually starting up the R Bourbon single barrel program, I got banned twice on accident because they thought I was trying to swap stuff. And I was like, here's my retailers, like, here's my importer, like, here's the licenses, like, this is the most legal thing in the world. And, it took a couple days, but I got on the phone with the actual Reddit admins and they're, we walked through it and they said, okay, like, all right, like, it's cool, like, cuckoo, cuckoo, like, headbutt, man. But it was rough for a couple of months, and I've spoken about it before. But and after that, I was kind of like, well, I have significantly less work to do because Scotch Swap is just banned. And our bourbon, and a lot of the mods for Scotch Swap moderate other stuff like our Scotch, like our World Whiskey, and Bourbon said, hey, we could use someone who's pretty detail oriented and has some free time, and it looks like you have some free time, like you want to give it a shot. And I said, okay, like I love doing what I do because like getting the community together. And so I hopped on at our Bourbon And I think it was 2018. And I've kind of picked up the other big community initiatives there, and it's worked out really nicely. But no, I think the Colonel is the first mod. I've actually never met him in person, but I met the rest.
Oh, okay.
The rest, I think, either virtually or in person. So
Sure.
it's kind of got its own storied path.
Yeah, no kidding. And it is funny to kind of talk about a community like Scotch Swap, excuse me, being just totally eradicated, especially in the times of Facebook bringing the ban hammer down on the secondary market as well, and how that has kind of altered to, try to be more secretive, I guess, but it's a strange landscape for people trying to find a way to elbow into the bourbon community. And I guess to some regard as well, the whiskey community is at large, excuse me. But it's become such a meme almost that there's like a new bourbon secondary market that pops up every week. And like from the outside in, for you, who is a critic of the products that are shaped by and that build this community, what's been your response to things like the secondary market and the shutdown and the kind of underground dark web, almost like dealings to try to keep it afloat?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think, I don't know, like on both sides of the argument are arguments that are almost as old as time themselves. Like some people are like, you know what, capitalism, I don't care, and usually those people can buy whatever they want, no matter what day it is, especially like anti-collection.
Yeah.
I'm somewhere in between. Honestly, what I think is most, I wouldn't say hilarious because it does hurt bourbon as a whole, but what I think is most futile is I see lots of people who want to get into BSM version 13 or whatever number they're up to now. So they can, they cleared 12 of these bottles off the shelf and they want to sell them at like $20 profit to themselves. And I think that's the funniest thing. Like, you're going to take on all this risk to sell something like, I'm by no means like a wealthy guy and like, I don't make like a shitload of money, but I would think that the effort to resell something illegally and then pack it up and ship it illegally would be worth like a little bit more than $15 after expenses. Right. And I say to those people, like, if that's how you want to spend your time, then like go for it. I don't feel bad when Facebook smites you off the face of the planet as they do so often, but and that's like the personal aspect, from a product aspect. I think it's interesting that people always ask, and I see this in lots of Facebook groups. They ask like, hey, I found this. I did zero research about it, but hey, Facebook, tell me, is it valuable? Like, should I buy the other 30 that are there to like make a quick buck? And I think that that's the aspect that bothers me most. Is that people have shifted from, there's 200 products on the shelves. Which one should I buy because I'll enjoy it most? To there's 200 products on the shelves. Like, which one should I buy 100% of to make a quick buck on? And that's where I think I become a kind of a critic of the secondary market. As of the products themselves, I think it's kind of clear when they come across my desk. Like, I have a strong sensation that this is probably going to become very difficult to find, whether I say good or bad about it. And this other thing that is excellent based, I had a 4-gate recently that I thought was amazing. And I was like, this is $200. It's probably not going anywhere fast either way. And so you kind of get those feels as you write about them. But that's kind of my 2 cents there.
I want to ask you too about this major shift that we of course saw in 2020 with the, everybody basically just being at home and their purchasing habits changing and their drinking habits changing as well. But at the same time, there was this need that we all felt to maintain and uphold the community that we had strived so long to almost said striven. Almost said striven, and I was like, that's not but strived to build up and allow to flourish over so many years. And with that, of course, has come drawbacks and flaws, just as it is with any new innovation. But how have you kind of adjusted, and what has been the biggest change that you've seen over the past year. I mean, we're literally in the same week of the year. I mean, 365 days ago, people were starting to go like, oh, this might not be the best thing that we should, I don't want to avoid this. So how have you viewed the changes and what changes have you made as well?
Totally. Yeah. You made a great point. So yeah, it was literally a year ago this week where, everyone kind of loosened their collar and went, I think we might have a problem, guys. We should go home. And, and it's funny. So I work in IT, I work in software, I work in a role where I'm kind of always on call and I'm always ready to do what I do remotely, which is kind of the Reddit mantra as well. Right. I think it's hard to put this into reference, but of all people in the whiskey world, I think I was actually impacted the least. I was certainly impacted in lots of interesting ways. Most notably, picking barrels is hard when you can't go to the places that you need to pick barrels. But pre-COVID, I was on the internet talking whiskey to all my friends every single day. And post-COVID, I'm still here on the internet talking whiskey to all my friends every single day. And it's interesting too, because I know people who are like, I'm struggling, man. Like, I don't get to talk to all the people I used to talk to. And I'm like, I'm sorry, like that's got to be a really stark transition. And like, how are you doing? And I'm like, selfishly, I feel pretty okay. I'm talking to all the same people I talked to pre-COVID and all the same mediums. Like, it sucks we can't meet up and get drinks together, but Reddit, 90% of my Reddit friend group does not live in Wisconsin where I am. So we all just kind of, we stuck through it and carried on doing the same thing. But where I saw the biggest shift was everybody else, right? Like big in-person tastings, not a thing. Big festivals, not a thing. Big barrel groups, not a thing. And it was really interesting to see, and I struggle with a good way to put this, but everyone move into the virtual world to like join me. Like I was kind of here alone with all my Reddit friends, like on the computer doing bourbon via the internet before COVID. And then everyone else was like, oh shit, we can't meet in person. We need to do bourbon via the internet. And then they like rolled on in and I was like, hey guys, like, thanks for joining me. It's cool in here. And we saw a great thing. Like we saw Whiskey from Home by Bourbon Pursuit. And they're like, hey, like you're on the internet, like join a panel. And I was like, hell yeah. Just another day in the life. Repeal Day Expo, which was super cool, super novel, super fun. And it was kind of cool to see the whiskey world, not because they had to, because I mean, there was a lot of terrible fallout from COVID, but it was very cool to see a lot of people all of a sudden realize that, and especially people like, you know what, Reddit sucks. And like, we just hate bourbon on the internet. Like you got to do bourbon in person and be like, well, now we got to do it on the internet. Let's see how it shakes out. Yeah. And it shook out just fine. Like there's hiccups, people got better internet, people got better cameras and microphones, but overall, the biggest shift was watching the rest of the whiskey community decide that it was time to hop online. And I thought that was pretty cool. And everyone's done swimmingly as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say one of my favorite things that has come out of endless Zoom meetings and Facebook Messenger chats is that people actually buy headphones now too. Because, hearing yourself played back on somebody else's speakers over and over and over again. Well, it's the worst, man. It absolutely drives me crazy. And it's purely just the audiophile tech junkie in me where I'm like, it's not that hard to plug your headphones in.
Oh man, I have a degree in film, and for a while I was just kind of like rolling, just like, guys, like just find something to plug in, please. Just plug anything in. Like I don't even care if it goes to your own headphones. Just like plug something in. I don't want to hear your speakers.
I had a microphone, a USB microphone for a long time that I was using for the podcast, and I would use it to record music too. And I could just plug the headphones right into it. Yeah, like that's beautiful when you're starting out. It's like exactly. I have literal immediate feedback. I don't have to worry anyway. That's just the difference between somebody who gets into podcasting or audio editing, recording, whatnot, and somebody who doesn't. But are you a born and raised Midwesterner?
No, actually. So I've been all over. I grew up in Seattle, Washington.
Oh wow.
And then early in life, I moved to the East Coast in Connecticut, and then that wasn't far enough, so I went to school in upstate New York, and then. In upstate New York, I graduated and I had people in New York and LA say, hey, you should come work for us. But then a company in Wisconsin said, no, come work for us instead. And I said, yeah, the Midwest seems pretty nice. And I trucked out here and I've stuck it out since. I don't think, I've done contract work and like Texas and stuff, but the Midwest is home. It just took me a while to find it.
Were you able to kind of slot yourself into that whiskey community in the Midwest? And also, what's the Midwest whiskey community look like? Like, I know of, like Speakeasy Wisconsin, of course, on Facebook, and Bill Robarch, who's Beer Lovers Wisconsin on social media, and listener of the show, good friend of the show. But like, is it just kind of pocketed, or does it feel a little bit more widespread like it does in some other areas?
It's interesting. So, I mean, in Wisconsin, it's kind of the whiskey lovers versus like the Corbel lovers. Like there's kind of like there's like a little turf war, right. where there's like a couple whiskey lovers, and there's more every single day, which is like cool and stuff. But it's pretty regional. Like there's the Milwaukee groups, there's the Madison groups. Yeah. None of them are really large or cohesive. It's mostly groups that are just trying to move all their own picks and stuff. But it's definitely not like Kentucky, where there's just like roving groups of bourbon aficionados just kind of rolling in everywhere. But yeah, the Midwest community I've mostly met people through the internet. Like I've met some of my best friends. They're like, hey, like I noticed that you are also from Wisconsin. And it turns out that we live like 8 miles from each other.
Oh, that's crazy.
We formed like really tight groups. Like there's like 6 or 7 guys that are like my closest friends. And we just like yak all day long on the internet and stuff. But, pre-COVID, we all got together. We would all share stuff. We'd split bottles. We'd have cookouts. And I see a lot of that. I don't see, like, I know a couple of the Wisconsin groups like get together for like a big event every now and then, but I don't see like Wisconsin as a state does not like rise up and be like, because everyone's just like slugging back another Corbel old fashioned sweet, but which is cool too. I mean, I always meet bourbon people like Miller Park, when it was still called Miller Park, and brewery games, and you'd see some guy, rocking back some bourbon and say hi and stuff. So, I mean, the Midwest is the easiest place to meet people. I think it's just finding people who also like whiskey and don't just want to like whack back a shot or something. Yeah. But it's pretty open. It's pretty fun.
As I was kind of saying that, it hit me, of course, that I know the folks at J. Henry. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, of course. That's a very prominent craft distiller.
Yeah, right down the road.
It's awesome, man. They're such good people, and I really do like what they're doing over there too. And I'm excited to see what they're going to be doing with it in the near future, as well as their products start to age up more and more. Yeah. So we've talked enough, just casual talk. I got to get to the nitty gritty of it. Let's talk about Whiskey Raiders. How did this project come about, and how were you kind of approached to head a lot of this as well?
Yeah, sure. So for everyone at home, Whiskey Raiders is a site published by Dan Abrams, who's a pretty cool guy. He's the legal correspondent for ABC, which is kind of a big deal. He is the host of Live PD when it was on air at A&E. So those two things are his biggest legacy. He covered, I believe it was the O.J. Simpson trial back many, many years ago. So he's long steeped in news and politics and all that kind of fun stuff.
I just say that my brain, as soon as you said Live PD, that's where I knew the name from, not from the ABC, which
that's 99% of people.
That absolutely blew me away. That's ridiculous. Anyway, I apologize for interrupting.
No, totally cool. I mean, and like Sean Sticks Larson, his co-host, like we talk whiskey, I won't say on the daily, but pretty frequently. And Dan and I talk whiskey all the time. But so Dan has been a long time wine lover, and in the wine world, the wine world is rich with publication, and it's like very rich with like scoring and rating aggregation. So much so that, Dan would be standing in the store and have 2 bottles of wine in his hand and say, I need a really quick opinion. And if you Google, that wine, you can pull up any number of services that take all the experts' ratings and they slot them together, and he would know like, okay, this is good, this is bad, I'm gonna pick this one or other one. But in filming Live PD and stuff, all of Dan's co-hosts kind of converted him to be a whiskey lover. And they were like, he would bring wine, everyone else would bring whiskey. And he was like, what, this whiskey shit, like it's pretty cool. But then, he'd go home and say, hey, I want to buy bourbon. And he'd be in the store and he'd have to read through, okay, do I want to buy Maker's Mark 101? Well, I know that wasn't out when this got started, but it's out now. And to get like a really good answer, he'd have to go to 4 or 5 or 6 different blogs and like read through a long form review and, you know, kind of have to and like put together all those pieces for himself. And that's kind of cumbersome to do in a grocery store, or, you know, anywhere else. So he got this idea, like, what if we launch the Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey and we bring all the big voices under one roof? We give people an easy, like, kind of jumping off spot where if you just want the raw numbers, we'll give you a raw aggregate rating. If you want to read more from each of the blog sources, we'll send you off to their websites. And, you know, they thought that was a really lucrative and really valuable thing that was missing in the whiskey community, which it totally is.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But then Dan realized that, like, hey, I need the service because I'm not a whiskey expert. So we should probably get one of those guys to run the site. And then so they reached out to me. They had been fans on Reddit for a while. They'd, you know,
very cool.
Spent a lot of time on Reddit in other communities like the Live PD community. They'd started getting used to, like, you know, they're like, everywhere we go on Reddit, like, we see your name. And then we realized, like, people understand that you know what you're talking about. So we should talk about maybe acquiring your review archive. We'll give it a boost to the site and we'll make you our in-house expert, and we'll launch this thing. And I'd kind of, over the years, I'd gotten offers here and there, and mostly people were like, wow, we just need like an in-house influencer. And I was like, that is the last thing I want. Like, I'm a science guy who just wants to give people, you know, valuable, quick, concise, professional information on whiskey. So this was the perfect opportunity. So we joined forces and we launched Whiskey Raiders.
Super, super cool. And I will definitely agree with Dan. I mean, the Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey is just something that it seems like a no-brainer, but it takes the right group of people with the drive and the motivation to actually create this thing and make it worth everybody's while for it to actually be worthwhile. So I'm super jazzed about the fact that it exists at all. I want to talk to you about your review system. So you specifically talk about how there's a kind of, and I'm trying to put this in my own words because because I agree with you, but it's almost like a very laissez-faire approach to reviewing whiskeys, where everything is either low to mid 80s rather, or, you know, on the higher end of the scale, you know, 97. And there's really nothing else outside of that. But you simplified it on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yep.
Talk about like how you developed that system yourself, and because we have a review system on the show as well. And I know it's not perfect. I know that there are some flaws within it, but it's the one that we kind of have rested our laurels on since we started the podcast. But what would have been some of the drawbacks that you felt might have come from your review system as well?
Sure. Yeah. So initially, and I'll throw this out here too, when I started writing, I used 0 to 100, just like I felt like everyone else did.
Yeah.
And I think it was right about like review like 115 or 116. It had like kind of bothered me for a while. And I realized that and starting with myself first and foremost, I realized that I was not using a lot of the scale at all, which kind of killed me. Like, all right, so what is the use of 100 points of resolution if I'm only gonna maybe use 30 of them? And that's like being extremely generous. And then I realized on top of that, the whiskey community at large was pretty much stuck in like 84 to like 96 or, you know, in that kind of range. And I'd actually run into some people, and it still kind of makes my blood boil. And they'd say things like, well, you know, the best score I've ever given is a 94. And I don't think I'll ever give better than that. And I was like, okay, so you're not on the 0 to 100 scale. You're on the 0 to 94 scale.
Right.
You know, like, what's the point of having 100 points if you're never going to use
exactly
many of them? So I kind of got to scheming, and I thought it was like everyone's used to the American school system, and that's cool. We all lived and died by that as we grew up. But people would also ask me like, hey, what would make you this 82 and 83? And as in tune as I am with like my palate and stuff, I was like, I'm not going to bullshit you. I have no idea. I don't know. Like, the difference between an 82 and an 83 is not substantial. I could not quantify it in a way that is going to be useful for you as a reader. So I got this really big whiteboard at Costco, and I like threw it up in my living room and I like worked on it for a week or two just because like
Fantastic.
and I'm like I have this weird personality where like it started to bother me and then like bothered me a lot and then it bothered me even more than that. And I was like, until I solve this, like this is just gonna make me upset. And like no one else is upset. Like no one's like, you got to change this thing, man. It's whack. I was just like in my head, coming from a math and science and engineering background.
Yeah.
I was like, this isn't right. Like I got to fix this. And like no one has to care about my ratings afterwards, but at least I'll know that I can trust them and like think about them as being worthwhile. So
right.
I like did a bunch of stuff. Like I pulled up Excel, like I got the whiteboard going. But
Yeah.
long story short, I settled on 1 to 10 with 5 being a midpoint because I thought it was valuable.
Yeah.
Like I have used 100% of my scale. I've given out ones, I've given out 10s. Like people kind of complain like, hey, a lot of stuff falls in the 4 to 6. I'm like, that's perfect. That's where it should be. It's in the middle of the scale,
Yeah.
you know? And over time, things kind of trend into like the 5 to 6 direction, which makes sense. Like I spend a lot of money on whiskey. Very routinely do I buy things that I think are going to be terrible. So, you know, that kind of checks out. But and surprisingly enough, after a year, a lot of people kind of were like, hey, you know what? Like, and people would send me messages like, hey, is it cool if I use your scale? And I was like, well, it's public domain. Like, go ahead.
Yeah.
Like, use it all you want. Like, I'm just glad that someone else thinks it's valuable. And a lot of people have moved over to it, but it just kind of helps knowing that, you know, everything isn't going to be an 84 if it's bad. Like it killed me. People were like, this is terrible. 82. And I was like, what? Like if it's terrible, like put it below 50 or put it in the 40s or put it in the 60s. Like just put it, you know, you use, if you're giving yourselves 100 points, like use them. And if you're not, then find something else. And that's kind of what motivated me to, I won't say fix it because like nothing's been broken, but in my own mind, like a scale that I could use 100% of was my definition of success. And it's worked really well for me.
Was it that year point that you kind of felt like things had started truly taking off for you?
Yeah, I think it was probably about 2 years. So
yeah,
and I'll speak to it again. Like I come from an engineering background and I wanted to learn more about whiskey and I was thinking about ways that I could learn more. And in school, I just graduated from college, which I didn't tell people at the time because I was 22 and no one wants to listen to a 22-year-old on the internet. So I thought it was best that maybe we just pull that out of the picture. But
yeah, you know, I started my show when I was 24.
Yeah.
So kind of the same boat there. But I also was probably a little too brazen about my age at that point because I was like, you know, I think truly I was like the youngest bourbon podcaster.
You have to have been. I can't imagine anyone younger.
Yeah, and I don't know if has anybody overtaken me with that? I don't think so. Yeah, man, that's bonkers. Anyway, sorry, I hadn't thought about that in a while. It's just crossed my mind.
Well, and I'm the same way. Like, you know, I shielded my identity for a very long time because I wanted people to disagree with my thoughts based on my thoughts alone, not just like this millennial jackass or whatever weird thought came into their head. And now, I mean, some people too, like even when Whiskey Raiders launched, some people are like, you know, because my info's out there. They're like, this guy's 28 and from Wisconsin. Why should I listen to him? And they're like, oh, because he's written about 2,000 spirits. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Maybe. And that's what I wanted people to see first. Like, just look at my experience. And like, you don't have to agree with me. Like, if you think what I'm saying is wrong, like that's totally cool. But don't think I'm wrong because I'm not 50. Think I'm wrong because I have like a terrible palate or one of the 100 other reasons to disagree. But I think it was probably around year 2 when I really got deep into the bourbon scene. Because I told myself when I first started writing, I wanted to start writing, and I figured that would help me understand how much I knew, and people would tell me how bad I was, and I would learn from that. And I told myself if I could just make it 1 week, like if you can write about one bourbon a week for the next week, like you'll probably learn something. And I figured I'd give up halfway. And clearly that's not the case because we're God knows how many weeks deep at this point, you know, a couple thousand days at this point. But,
I'm not kidding.
You know, it was like a personal challenge. Like if you want to learn more about whiskey, like research the bottle, write your thoughts. People will tell you if you're on the right track, if you're wrong. Like teaching is the best way to understand what you know about a subject. Yeah. And I still think that's true. And it's worked out pretty well. But around year 2, people are like, hey, this guy's not stopping it. I don't think he's going to stop soon. And they were kind of along for the ride at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that to a degree as well. Just seeing the community around my podcast grow as well and being like, oh, these are people who have, either been listening since day one or came in, on day, 85 or whatever. And they're like, oh, I'm going to listen to your entire back catalog.
Yeah.
Like, okay, sure. You do what you want, do what you want. But, it is nice to feel that comfort of, longevity almost with some of this. So and I'm actually turning 28 in August. So we're like
join the club. Yeah.
Right on the same like wavelength in terms of like, do people really take me seriously? And it's funny because like at times I've been like, I'm just some guy like, putting out my thoughts on a spirit, but other times it's like, I really want to get my feelings out about this whiskey. I want to let people know how much I loved at the time Elijah Craig A120 last year.
Yeah.
Just I've raved and raved and raved about it. And, hindsight's 2020. I might not score it as high as I did then, but at the same time, like, exactly. What are you going to do? You throw your hands up in the air and it was like, I grew, things have changed since January of 2020. Very in more ways than one, of course.
A little bit, yeah.
But did you ever actually kind of catch that flack of this guy's too young, he doesn't know what he's talking about? Because I've had that a few times as well. I mean, especially early on, within the first like year, I think I had encountered that at least once or twice.
So honestly, no, I haven't, and that is
lucky.
Well, and I won't say I'm lucky. It was entirely by design. It was, I think it was mid 2018. I was on Bourbon Pursuit. I did that behind a black screen. Like people did not know who I was.
Oh, snap.
So people did not know at that point. I was 26.
Yeah.
I always wanted to remove the age and experience because I felt like there was so much bias, but I did a couple times. Like people would say, hey man, I'm going to be in Milwaukee. I've been reading your shit for a really long time. I think it would be a dream to meet you. And I was like, that's awkward. Like, don't dream about me. But like, super cool. I was like, hell yeah. Like, let's meet up for a drink. And I could always tell, and everyone was super polite and everyone was the nicest, but I could always tell when I wandered through that door that I was not the person they were looking for. They were looking for like an old ass dude with like a Gandalf beard.
They were looking for Fred Minnick almost, or
that beautiful ascot. They were just waiting for that ascot to just wander through the door, and and I'd be like, "Hey, I'm gonna be wearing this," and they'd be like, "Holy shit! Like you're young." And I'd be like, "Yeah, man. Like, what's it to you? Like, should we get drinking or what?" And they'd be like, "I didn't expect it." Like, and I've always been like a really clinical person. Like, I really like to write white papers in college. Like I really valued things like prose and like professional grammar. And they'd be like,
of course.
You're so well written for someone who's so young. And I'd be like, cool, like let's move on. Like, should we get drinking? And like the whole time we're like, well, we gonna drink or like what? Like, we're just gonna, and it was always, everyone was like, wow, well, like I'm really impressed. And be like, well, thanks. Like, we gonna need a drink. But so I haven't had a lot. And one of the reasons too, like there's some very angry people on Reddit. Like I've gotten a non-zero amount of death threats and people who, who routinely private message me in the middle of the night to tell me what a terrible person I am. But like, that's not age related either. I think if they didn't know I was young, they would have found some other reason to be upset. But really people have been pretty good. And, now that I don't look like a little baby and I'm almost 30 and, maybe I'll cop a 30 under 30 before I turn 30, but I kind of doubt it. But like,
the dream. I mean,
I'm not like, and I've grown a lot. 22 was young, but I wanted to learn, and I was really glad that no one discouraged me because I was young, and like I didn't like, I could spend a lot less than I could now, so I had to be kind of choosy. But coming up on 30, people, when I walk into a place, like someone's first thought isn't like, look at this little baby guy. It's just like he's a little bit younger than the rest of us, and then we get to drinking, which is the whole reason I'm there anyway. So
not getting carded has its blessings and its curses. And I'm at the point where I just look at it anyway. Like it's not trying to flaunt anything. It's just like I just want to get this out of the way. I don't know if you're going to ask or not, but just I want my drink. Just give me my turkey 101 or whatever the heck you got at the bar. But it is kind of funny to me. Like you and I basically were starting our journeys at the same time.
Sure.
like it just kind of in different spaces. And like I wasn't always review minded or even podcast minded. I mean, it took me, I mean, yeah, again, like I was probably 22 when I really started getting into bourbon. And then by 23, edging closer to 24, I was like, I should do something with this. I'm already having conversations about it. And,
Sure.
you know, I may as well. So it's funny because from what I'm understanding from you, you kind of always had this mindset of, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to go for it all the way.
Yep.
Whereas I just kind of like stumbled into it bass backwards, basically. And it was like, yeah, here we go. But like, and I want to touch on this too, because I spent a good chunk of my college career being an English major before switching over to graphic design. And it's a weird question, and I'm not necessarily using this as a method to, you know, try to pull information or knowledge out of you or experience. But like,
Sure.
there are people who are always like, how did you start doing this? Why did you, decide, oh, it's a podcast that I want to do, or I want to write reviews on the internet, even though people are going to email me and say, you're dumb. But like, what are the driving factors for somebody who might be looking to get into writing about whiskey?
Sure. That's a great question. For me, it was I wanted to gauge how little I knew, and I figured the first way to do that was to attempt to cover something in depth. And also at that time, like I had been drinking bourbon for not a very long time. I mean, maybe a year or two. I sustained an injury in high school, and for the first couple of years of college, they basically said, if you want to have one drink a night, like that's great. If you want to have two, like that's good, but like call it a day. If you want to have three, like you might be looking at some organ damage, and it was a pancreatic thing, and it cleared up and it was fine. But that's when I decided like 2 Keystone Light or like 2 good bourbon. Maybe I should try the bourbon route because Keystone didn't taste that great. So like, that's kind of where I was like, you know what, this tastes better. And so I kind of had a basis of understanding like, okay, so I prefer this because it tastes better, but there's a million of them and I can't afford to buy that many of them. So let's start to figure out what makes a good bourbon, what makes a bad bourbon. Let's write analytically. But really for people, like so many people feel so much pressure, especially because bourbon's blown up now to be like, oh, okay, I love bourbon. Now I have to turn it into a thing. Like, I need a side hustle now. Like I bought my first bottle of bourbon 2 days ago on a Friday. Now it's Monday. Like I'm a bourbon thing. Like, don't feel any pressure. Like like I told myself, like, if you can do this for 5 days and you still find it interesting at the end, then like maybe you'll keep it up. And clearly that was the case. But I think a lot of people feel a lot of pressure to be more into bourbon than maybe they want to be. And if you like fall head over heels for bourbon, I think that's awesome. But I also get a lot of people that are like, you know what, I've tried 10 bourbons and like, I just didn't enjoy any of them. And I asked them like, well, what do you think about gin? And they're like, well, I hadn't thought about gin. Like, maybe I should try. Like, there's so much, and like, whiskey I know is like cool and hip and now it's mainstream media. Like the amount of whiskey advertising is like a under 30 or an under 40-year-old is just bonkers. Like you're supposed to like whiskey if you're cool. And like people, like guys are told like, ladies love dudes that love whiskey, but if you're not feeling it, you're probably going to feel something else. Go find that. But
yeah, absolutely.
And like, don't take too much stock in your writing. If you only want to write 100 words, like there's not many people that only write 100 words. If you want to write 10,000 words, there aren't too many of those too, but do kind of throw what you know, or if you try something new, try something that you're passionate about, something that like, because if you don't interest you, you're not going to interest any readers.
Yeah,
that's kind of the first thing. Like, don't force it. So that's my 2 cents.
And I will be very frank. I mean, one of the things that I've discovered over the past couple of years as well is that I am reviewing far less than what I am tasting.
Sure.
Right. And like towards the end of last year, I was like, man, I haven't even put out like an official review for the Yellowstone 2020 limited edition or even Knob Creek Cast Strength 12 year, which wound up being my number 1 of 2020. And I never put out an official review of it.
Sure.
And so like there is kind of that void that I almost feel. And part of it is the writer in me, but part of it is also like the desire to just get these thoughts out and take the time and be very, very methodical and just be honest in a written format and go, I I don't always have time to review everything on the podcast. I need to, get this out in some way. So, the part of me was kind of like, hey, what are your tips? But at the same time, it was like, I know that people are listening and going, I want to do something with this, but I agree with you. You don't have to always do something with it if it's, something that's going to eat up your time. But at the same time, I want to see somebody who does what you said. And the first day after they bought their very first bottle of bourbon, they start a podcast or they write a review or something. And this isn't really the space for it. I mean, this is episode 170, 169. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But like, it would be crazy to see somebody just take a nosedive into the review community with no prior knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's not that, they'd have to have never had anything to drink, but, if they just were totally oblivious to the community and to the industry and just tried to kind of float to the top, as it were, I guess.
Sure.
That would be a really interesting project to see. So if you know somebody or,
Okay.
out there listening, not just you, Jay, somebody else out there as well. If you know somebody who doesn't like bourbon, but they want to try something, or maybe they've never had it before, give them that opportunity to, get into this.
It's super hokey, but my favorite quote is a Confucius quote. And it says, it does not matter how slow you go, as long as you do not stop. And that's kind of, now I have to juggle a lot of things. And so my goal is, okay, if it's been a couple of days since I got a review, that's okay, but don't let this be the period. Like, don't let this be the end. Like, don't let so many days go by that you get used to the comfort of like, well, I didn't push out a review for 3 weeks. It's fine. Like, get something done. Even if you write half a review, even if you get part of the paper,
Yeah.
You don't have to turn out 5 reviews a day, but make sure you get that one a week, whatever that interval is that keeps you engaged. And also too, like if you start to feel like it's a slog that you don't enjoy, first and foremost, like we all love whiskey here. So don't let feeling like you need to do something poison your love of whiskey. Because that's, it's easy to burn out and stuff. But yeah, if you're into it and you got the time, do what I did. Like I knew literally nothing. The first review was Eagle Rare. I got back from the store and I did a quick Google and I was like, cool, Buffalo Trace. Like, let's dive on it. And I was like, wow, that, Buffaloes and Eagles. And I was Googling the ABV and the filtration and what single barrel mean. And that's where I started, so like I started at the total bottom. And if I can pull it off and keep it going, that should absolutely be a form of encouragement to anyone else who, and if you do stop and you're like, what, this sucks, I'd rather just go back to drinking bourbon, then you probably have some other great talent somewhere else. But if you love it, you would have never found it if you didn't decide to go balls deep and give it a shot.
Great phrase there. For
hopefully, yeah. I don't know if we'll need to censor that. But afterwards, I was like thinking of I watched the movie Dodgeball this weekend, and I was like, it just occurred to me that like I probably could have found a better way to phrase that. But
you know what? I'm just,
average Joes.
I'm just gonna leave it. I've done a couple episodes where I've put like a warning up front that it's probably not best to listen around your kids or your granny. So
we should have led with that. I'm sorry.
No. It's fine. I mean, I'll do it. I have this whole little edited. It sounds like you're turning on a radio and somebody's saying, "Warning: this is not suitable for kids or your grandmother." And like, it sounds really cool. I enjoyed doing the editing behind this. So I might throw it up at the front end of it. I don't know. It depends on,
We'll see how it ends. But like, yeah, like if you need to like, hide your kids, hide your granny, take some time. Like I get it. Totally cool.
Let's take a hard left turn too, because you did bring up gin.
Yeah.
And I actually, gin was never on my radar when I was, I don't mean for this to sound as bad as it does, but when I was growing up, because I'm a Kentucky boy and like bourbon was the thing that was always around. Now, to be fair, I didn't start drinking until I was about 20, but that was just never anything that was in my lexicon. And
Okay.
so I started, my wife and I are high school sweethearts. And as we got into college, she, hung on to gin as her spirit of choice. And so I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I really like gin. I think it's got a lot of qualities to it that, of course, bourbon, it just doesn't allow.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you can kind of feel like some of the laurels that bourbon in terms of ingenuity and innovation and creativity are derived from when it comes to something like gin. When you're talking about the history of bourbon, when you talk about the history of whiskey in general, where's the first place that your mind goes to? I mean, are you thinking of distillers in Scotland and Ireland? Are you thinking of people like E.H. Taylor, or, even so far back as the first people in the Mesozoic era who discovered that, if you let these grapes sit out for too long, they're going to start tasting real good and you feel like you conquer the house next door, whatever.
You can take down that woolly mammoth. No, I got you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we could have a little arm wrestle, and I'd probably knock him to the ground, maybe on a good day. But if the sun hasn't been shining for a couple of days because of the volcanic ash around. But
yeah, yeah, it's interesting for me because distillation, first and foremost, has always been like a chemical process. So I kind of am detached from the romanticism of, people have been doing this for hundreds and hundreds of years. I'm very into the modern, which kind of sucks because I love really old whiskey, right? I think that's super cool.
Sure.
But when I think of this is distillation at its finest, I'm thinking of places like Bardstown or some of the new extremely high tech like MGP that are clinical, automation. But gin is very different from that. Gin is very we did a tiny batch, we picked this random stuff from around the facility, we threw it in the basket. So those two things are kind of different for me. Ethanol, at least consumable ethanol in a premium, format started for me as something that I wanted to get into and kind of couldn't afford to, but was super interested. And bourbon
absolutely.
started for me as bourbon was a better vodka, right? Everyone in college was just guzzling vodka all day long. And I was but this bourbon stuff tastes really good. Let's figure out
absolutely,
why is it like that? Oh, it spent time aging. Well, vodka doesn't get that, and so I was kind of well, what makes bourbon better? And then that's when I started to dig into okay, this is how it's made now. But wait, bourbon's been around for 1,000,000 years. Okay, let's dig into that. Okay, cool. E.H. Taylor and Castle and Key and Buffalo Trace and their warehouse, and I got super interested in Warehouse X and stuff like that. So for me, it was a very kind of analytical. It was I wanted I enjoy drinking bourbon, even the crappy stuff that might, if I'm not home and my friends had bourbon, I still enjoy this more than everything else. But why is
absolutely.
that? And kind of, digging into, okay, well, this is how it's different in terms of mash. This is how it's different in terms of proof. This is how it's different in terms of aging. And then kind of being well, how did we get to this point? If I wanted to make bourbon, how would I know that 8 to 10 years in these conditions is best? And people have been doing it for a really long time, and they've mostly are in Kentucky and stuff like that. So my journey of getting accustomed to the spirit was kind of trying to figure out why is this so much better for it was only $6 more than the vodka. Surely college kids have $6 rattling around. We could buy pizza at the end of the night. If you want a good drink, why don't you just buy something, which sounds kind of preposterous now. People are why doesn't this taste better? And I'm why don't you just spend more money? But in college, that's not really the de facto solution. Is not we'll just throw money at this problem because no one has any money to throw around. But I never really started the Mesozoic woolly mammoth period of when they were should we make perfume or should we make booze? And everyone was booze, but
it's not. I'm not pulling that from a sense of oh, this is how I think about it all the time. It's just that is. It's almost steeped in history and lore that it's people have been doing this for a lot longer than we actually recorded history.
Yeah.
Bourbon is not something that came about over the past 400 years because some guy had to char the fish smell out of his barrel and then, had to dump whiskey into it. I mean, there's something that has been deep seated in our little goopy brains, it's like, but what if I felt good when I ate or drank this? It's like, what if it was just a little bit different and I feel a little bit better about it afterwards? But it's funny because bourbon has become almost like, and yes, the boom has allowed for it to grow past this, but in some ways it still maintains this feeling of like a luxury item.
Oh, for sure.
And we spend so much time and countless hours out of our days and weeks and years off of our life talking about this. And does it ever kind of hit you? And this is a conversation we can have back and forth as well, that it's kind of odd that this is what we've latched onto, because it is, again, a luxury item.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need it to survive, but everybody who consumes it and purchases it enjoys it at a very, deep, meaningful degree, to the point where we're building communities around it and we're spending time going out of our way to pick barrels and talk about the history and say, oh yeah, but I used to have this bottle of Elmer T. Lee that was just the best single barrel I'd ever had in my entire life. And I've, either always been chasing that again or, looking for something that's going to get close to it. But I'll speak from experience too. Every now and then it's like, am I doing something meaningful? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it hits me every now and then, but then, I justify it because, I do feel like I'm adding something meaningful to this narrative, to this informal discussion, as it were, about what this means to us as people.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There's two things I want to hit on there. First off, like, I do think it's funny when people ask me, like, are you really bothered that like this new release is going to be $1,000? And I'm like, no, it's a luxury item. Like, I can afford some of this luxury item. I can't afford $1,000, but like someone out there can. Like, I'm not upset that I'm priced out of this, because like there's different tiers of luxury. But second, I think it's really interesting. And it's something to, just this past Valentine's Day, I've always kind of wanted to get into hot sauce, but I've never had a good way to do it. And I've always had really bad hot sauce. I've just been like, it's just pain water that you put on food. And everyone it's a big like sausage measuring contest, like how much pain.
Of course.
But my wonderful fiance bought me this like Fuego box, and it's like 12 different expressions from like not hot to hot.
But
they're all different styles. And I had a bunch of them. I was like, there is so much flavor here. And I'm like super into it. Like I've been into whiskey for a long time. Like, got to catch them all, whatever. But now I'm like feeling the same itch that I had on day one of whiskey, which is like, there's a million options. I know nothing about any of them. All I know is like, this is fucking delicious on no matter like any day, whatever I want.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking about whiskey, because whiskey is kind of the same way. And like, I kind of doubt that like I'm going to mod our hot sauce and it's going to be 200,000 people strong. And like, it's going to be the same thing as bourbon. But I was like, because sometimes too, people are like, don't you get tired of being surrounded by alcohol like every second of every day? Like, isn't that unhealthy? And I'm like, well, you got to make it healthy. Like, you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But, I was like, if people do this with hot sauce, like, this is super cool too. I think the value is, I like to spend as much of my time as possible being positive. Like, do not get me wrong.
100%.
Like, if I've removed 100 posts that break the rules and someone calls me a dick for removing their post that like clearly violates the rule, and it's the end of the day, like, I will give you the hands. Like, I will snark you out a little bit. But like, like normal people, like, hey man, like, I just want a suggestion. Like, I love being able to contribute, and I try and follow like the 99-1, like 99 positive interactions for every negative interaction. Like, sometimes you just need to tell a guy like, hey, you know what? Like, you are not good for this community. And I'm like, I'm a ban your ass. And you hit him with the hammer, and like, I feel bad when I do, but I love to give back, and like, people just, ask questions and like, hey, trying to be supportive and suggestive. And like, cause at the end of the day too, I think as long as you're healthy with your whiskey habit, like having a really great outlet to give you a sense of community, B, give you a sense of enjoyment, and just like sit back and like relax with like a good whiskey is so good, especially mid pandemic. Like a lot of people are just wound really tightly. Like, hey, what if we all just had a whiskey?
We just
And
had
we
a drink together, man.
kicked back and like just like let the stress, like you'll sleep better if you don't have too much, and that's kind of where I've felt, because sometimes I do wonder, like, should I be picking up like a charity instead? Like, is my time better spent elsewhere? But then we do a barrel and I get to see 200 goons get to connect with each other over our bourbon, and everyone's just like having the best time. And like, those are the moments where, some days it's 11 o'clock and I'm like, why am I still awake? Okay. I got some our bourbon stuff to get out of the way. But like, those are the moments that like really solidify for me that, doing stuff for the whiskey world is still super valuable. And the fact that like it gives, 175,000 people a place to come at the end of the day and learn more if they want to learn more. They can chat with old friends if they want to chat with old friends. And if everyone else just wants to like have a drink, kick back, get ready for the next day and just chill and let the day wear off, like, I think that's great. And that for me is 100% of the value.
When you talk about something like a charity drive or just trying to, better the world around you, not just through, positive influence on your own community, but also trying to share the wealth that you have found in a community that has been built around what you do. That to me is still valuable.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, like the past couple of years have raised money for Movember.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like that is, and truthfully, I mean, it's nothing that, I have to go super out of my way to promote or to, to make happen. But at the same time, I mean, I do have to actively talk with people and encourage them to donate, and talk with the folks at Movember and say, hey, we're still interested in partnering with you guys, and we want to actually give back to a community that is really crucial to the folks that, make up who we are. I mean, and I'll talk about Movember for a second too. It's for men with mental health issues and just health issues in general, because we as guys don't talk about it enough. Mm-hmm. And by finding somebody who is going to spread that word and say, you're not alone, you can talk about it if you need to, here are the resources for you to actually better yourself, it's a lot more encouraging seeing the organic growth of it, and knowing that people are doing it, not just because you said something about it and you're like, hey, you should really go and support this thing that I believe a lot in, but you're also seeing people also understand why you're passionate about it, and building on that excitement that you've introduced with something like a charity drive.
Yeah, and it's worth noting here that like, so we're actually doing a bunch of charity events this year for like dog shelters around America through our barrel program. But when I was talking charity there, I might like, some days I wonder like, all right, so I spent 4 hours doing our bourbon stuff today. Like, should I have volunteered that time, like to go like run copies for, insert charity name here. And that's definitely an excellent use of time. But I think with, like with a great audience like you have, and with the audience that our bourbon has, like it's really profound to also think of like, hey, let's do something really unconventional, partnering with Movember. We're going to do some charity barrels this year that are, barrels are already in crazy high demand, but okay, if these are going to be the 5 top demand, let's tack an extra, 10 or $20 on the bottle, and we'll ship a couple $1,000s to a charity in need. And I think it's cool to have those outlets, especially, whiskey is still blowing up. So it's really cool to use that momentum to give back in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And that conversation that we're constantly having, when's the boom going to end? When are things going to slow down? And it's like, I don't really care about it. Yeah. Even if it just continuously expands, I don't want to think about the end in sight. I'm just happy enjoying the community as it is. There's a new bourbon drinker who comes into the fold every day, and we should be willing to open our arms to them,
And honestly, like people ask me like, hey man, like, aren't you excited for the boom to end soon? And I'm like, A, it's not ending soon.
No,
And B, like, no, let's keep this thing
not at
going.
all.
Like, sure, like I'm not really upset that I can't buy Blanton's any day. Like I never have been. And if some
Yeah.
people's definition of the boom ending means like they can buy Blanton's any day they want, like cool, great for them. But there's so much amazing bourbon that I couldn't even buy
Yeah.
5 years ago. Like, why would I want the boom to stop? Like
Yeah, of course.
we're in the heyday, and like I've met a lot of people in the last couple of years, but there's a lot more people to meet. Like, let's keep this party going. Who knows? Maybe
What's that line from the Office finale where Andy goes, "I wish that you could know when you're in the good days," or something
yeah.
like that. You know, like that's it's funny because now that we are kind of in the zeitgeist of knowing that, and we can step back and look at it and go, oh, things are really good right now. Like they've never been better for this community than they are right this second. Like it is kind of gratifying to feel that sense of ownership at the same time going, I'm very happy with how things are, but let's see how far we can stretch them.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, and it's weird too. I haven't seen this feeling until like the whole GME like diamond hands like Wall Street bets thing, where everyone was like,
Yeah.
"It's taken off. Like we're cool now. It's taken off. Like let's never stop." But I'm like, okay, so you like the 72 hours you guys have felt like have broken down like the last 10 years of whiskey. Like, yeah. let's go to the moon with it. Like it's a super cliched thing, but there's no reason to stop. And my good buddy John, and on Tuesdays we co-host Weekly Whiskey, and he always says like everyone asks when the golden days of whiskey are, and he's like, we're in them. These are the golden days
Right
like,
now.
go buy great bourbon and just love on life because these are the days. And I totally agree with him. I think it's a great point.
I have a habit of sharing. I've talked about this on the podcast numerous times, but when I get maybe an allocated bottle or a store pick that I'm really excited about, I just have this habit of not being able to keep it away from people. Yeah. Like, you know, my dad's a bourbon drinker. My father-in-law is a bourbon drinker. I've got friends, of course, co-hosts. And I'm like, I want you to try this. I want you to experience this with me. And the downfall of that is I don't have the backlog of, you know, store picks or allocated products that a lot of people do because they're storing them for a bunker. Whereas my main takeaway is I really like this. I really want you to like this as well. You know,
that's the fun of it. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I'm so much more interested in sharing it with people and breaking it out and going, now I know how cool Weller is to you, but you've never had William LaRue Weller, you know, like this is where I put my bottle of antique collection. If I had one. We are literally just, and I've picked up on every single one of your references too. We grew up in the exact same era. And I think that we have pretty similar tastes in media and comedy as well. Like even as you were talking about breaking out the whiteboard and going, I've got to fix this. I was like, you would get along really well with Richard Hendricks. Like you would probably solve the middle out for Pied Piper on freaking Silicon Valley. Sorry, slipped my mind for a second. But anyway, I want to ask you this. It's almost like a two-parter.
Sure.
What's been your most controversial review that you've put out, and what's your hot take about bourbon or the whiskey community at the moment, or just bourbon in general? It doesn't even have to be about the community. Yeah.
Okay. So, my hot take will be spicy, but it's definitely not the first one I've shared. My most controversial, honestly. So I really like normal Blanton's. I think that Blanton straight from the barrel is only slightly better. And that usually,
wow.
I think that if you're going to pay for barrel proof bourbon, you should not pay for Blanton straight from the barrel, which I don't, this is not my spicy take. So I'll let this bleed in. I think that if you're going to buy barrel proof bourbon, throw that grenade back at whoever tossed it to you and get something different. Elijah Craig barrel proof is too stinking good these days for people to spend. Even Blanton's Gold, I don't know, Flask Fine Wine sent me an email that had like the cheapest Blanton straight from the barrel they had was like $400, and I know they had to
Whoa,
import in.
no.
And people are like, "Hey, man, this looks like a great price," and I was like, "Have we never talked at all? Like delete the email."
Get rid of the paper trail.
Like Larceny barrel proof, amazing. Stag Jr., amazing. Elijah Craig barrel proof, amazing. Like, why are you asking me these questions? Even I was super pumped. I just bought a Town Branch. It was 11-year Oloroso matured bourbon at like 66%. And it was $60. Like, put down. It was crazy. It made no sense to me.
Where is this? I gotta buy a bottle of that.
It was Total Wine, Wisconsin. Like,
this is coming from a guy who like doesn't like Town Branch for the most part, because when they started out, it was just hot garbage with a capital.
Yeah, it was just cherry wheat garbage. It was hot garbage, but like it was $66, and it was great. Drop me a line if you want. I'll send you one. But
you know, I'm all about that.
I saw it and I was like, I had to do a double take. No pun intended, because like these stats, this price, this producer, like what? But so I think that one always generates, and I love, and people always tell me like, well, now you just hate Bland's. I'm like, well, okay. So I've had people send me Bland's blind. I've had friends be like, hey, that bourbon, like it was Bland's, and like it pains me to tell you this, but you just don't like Bland's. And it's something about the herbaceous rutabaganess of the profile that kills me.
Oh, wow. Huh.
It tastes like dirt. It's just dirty. And I don't mean dirty like bad. It just is dirty tasting bourbon. I don't love it.
You know what's funny is like that has totally reminded me of the way that I drink Blanton's, and kind of like almost ignoring that earthy note on there too. Just going like, oh no, but it's a good single barrel for the most part. But yeah, it does get really, really dirty.
Yeah. Shoot, so that always generates some posture. My really hot take is that I think that people need to, and I will say this just beginning, like David Jennings and I are really good friends. Super great dude.
Yeah, man.
So just remove any thoughts of Herbert from this equation. But people need to stop giving Wild Turkey credit, because they're way behind, and they're always behind, and they're never ahead of anything.
Wow.
Wild Turkey, I think, it kills me. Everything that Wild Turkey has done that is super popular and lauded is like 6 years later than when they should have done it. And I know it's cool to romanticize them and their rich history of being behind, but
all right,
they put out great products too. They put out great products, but they are no innovator. And every time their new product comes out and everyone is like, hooray. I like to remind them that if it was any other distiller, they could have said hooray like 5 years before that.
I'm gonna pull the high school math teacher. show your work. Like where are you pulling this specifically from? Like I've got maybe an idea of where you're going with it, but I need specificity here, Jay.
Sure, I'll give it to you. So everybody, hooray! Wild Turkey 17 bottled and bond was being done at Heaven Hill with the William Heaven Hill series. Limited release. We're getting Master's Keep 1. I know everyone is saying that, hey, Campari couldn't possibly have said that toasted barrels are catching on. You should now do one. But, they're coming. Woodford has been doing them for a long time, followed by Old Forester a little bit after that, followed by Elijah Craig slightly after that. And then, hey, look, we're getting a Master's Keep toasted barrel. Unsurprising. We're still don't have a single barrel proof offering from Wild Turkey, which Heaven Hill is now giving us our, well, I know we're getting Elijah Craig's single barrel proof, but we've gotten a bunch of others.
Do you think we'll get rare breed single barrel picks, or at least some kind of barrel proof single barrel offering from Wild Turkey in the future?
I'll be honest with you. I think we do, but I think there'll be another presidential election before we do.
Wow.
I mean, Single Cask Nation, we know that they can do it. Like Single Cask Nation.
Yeah, of course.
And they bought them like a while ago. It was 3 years, 3 years maybe. But like, we know that they will let them go out. And I understand, like, they've brought up a new distillery. Like, you can't just spin up new products overnight, especially with bottling lines. And they have a lot of products to get out. But if everybody else can do it, like Wild Turkey, chop, chop, come on. Like, and it's no question, like I will be the first in line to buy it. Like, give me that single barrel proof, whatever. Like I will buy it all day. But everyone is very hot to say you shouldn't buy X, Y, or Z because Wild Turkey 101 or Rare Breed is amazing. But yeah, they're amazing because they've been doing the same thing for a long time and expand really slowly.
And I guess to your point, I mean, that makes sense because Rare Breed only really has broken the 110 proof point in the past 3 years, right? 4 years? Was it 2017 when it hit 116.8?
I think, yeah.
Or maybe
really
it was
early 2018. I was thinking on the other side. Maybe it was 2017.
Oh, really?
I'm trying to think of when it
We'll have to ask Dave.
I know. That's going to be rocky. I'll be like...
he is listening to this right now with smoke coming out of his ears for the most part. But I do agree with you, though. I think that there are, in terms of innovation, Wild Turkey seems to be a little bit more responsive than they do innovative. But at the same time, I mean, maybe their goal is just to respond to the market or see what has been successful or popular and kind of take their own spin on it. I mean, that's nothing new. We've seen that plenty in the craft beer world over the past,
oh God, yeah.
8 to 10 years. I mean, that's from, the rise of the hazy IPA to slushies from, 450 North. Like those two things have like set the stage for anybody who's in craft brewing to just lose their minds and go all out with it.
And I will say too, like this is like, I think Wild Turkey makes phenomenal products, which I'm thankful for. And there's like I'm not doubting their quality. And I think that it's a completely sound market strategy to say, hey, we have 1 million competitors. Like, let's watch them falter and do weird craft beer things. And we'll see if, we'll see what sticks and we'll do it. But, people are like, hey, like Wild Turkey's innovative and always doing the newest, coolest stuff. I'm like, I don't think that's true. But I'm also thankful that bourbon isn't like craft beer because people have to hold on to their distillate for a couple of years to see if dill pickle whiskey is a good idea. Or beer, you just turn out dill pickle beer and in 48 hours, if you're good or bad.
And there are so many people who love pickle beer. So many people. One of my good buddies, Travis, who lives in Texas, fan of the show, long time, good friend of the show as well. I know where this
is going.
Yeah, like he loves the pickle beer that comes out of Texas. I mean, like he'll text us about it every year when it drops. And he's like, I bought like 4 6-packs because it's the best thing I've ever had. And like, I've not had it. I'm not going to speak to it one way or another, but it's almost the Pappy effect. Like that's kind of the general thread that I use to describe things now. It's like, has it been overhyped or am I actually going to love it for what it is?
Sure.
I've gotten so not defensive, but maybe a little bit offensive actually when somebody goes, oh, you got to try this new product or the thing that you've, heard about for so long, maybe this is going to live up to your expectations or you're just going to be, super, super disappointed in it. Do you still kind of experience that? Because I don't get that as much anymore with having tasted and reviewed so many things that I'm rarely surprised by a new product or rarely taken off guard when somebody's like, you've never had this before.
Yeah. I mean, the first point of that is, and this is in no way like a brag or a pat on the back, but like at this point, they're truly in the world of American whiskey. Like there are plenty of products I haven't had, but if there's something notable and I haven't had it, it's probably because it's brand new and I just haven't had it yet. Mm-hmm. But when people saunter up and they're like, oh my God, like you need to try this. It's amazing. You've definitely never had it. Like there's an 80% chance that I probably at some point have had it. And then I'm usually polite. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's normally with people who are like less familiar with it, like family members, like acquaintances. But, and a lot of time, like people ask me like, are you jaded? Like, no, there's still stuff I get crazy excited about, like bullet barrel strength. Like it is hard not to jump up right now and just be like bullet, like thanks for waking up and joining the show. Like you're killing it. Like blenders select, like single barrels, like barrel strength, like hot diggity. So I'm definitely not a jaded guy. Like there's new stuff to get excited about.
I do love that you went from balls deep to hot diggity. That's like, there's no in between for you.
I mean, yeah, like I'm a perfectly excitable guy. Like I tried the Thomas Moores. People are like, oh, they're just doing weird wine finishes, and I was like, no, I'm gonna buy them all.
But they're
and I
not.
went and bought them, and they were great. Like,
The Chardonnay finish is so good. I've been dying to see a Chardonnay finished bourbon for a long time, and it as soon as I had it, I was like, this is what I've been looking for a while, and I just am so thrilled by that product. You know what's funny though? I can't find the Thomas Moores anywhere in Kentucky.
Oh, well, once again, if you need a hand, just let me know.
I'm going to like write out a list and be like, Jay, hey man, I got another thing I want added to it. You know,
do it. I mean, like Wisconsin is hardly the hot spot, but when we get random shit, like we get 900 million of them. So
it's like how Ohio just always has Weller Antique.
Yeah, in Texas like, with special reserve.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like, how did that become the norm for the market?
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. But like, I'm a perfectly excitable guy. Like some people, when they're like, you know, this new release comes out, I'm like, it was okay. And they're like, well, you just don't like anything new these days. And I'm like, no, like there's great stuff I love. Like there's so much stuff that and even the new Maker's Mark, the FAE01, I thought was really great. I was super excited about it. So I'm not a hard guy to excite, but if you give me the same single barrel 90 proof from the same distillery as 9 other, like, yeah, I'm probably gonna have a hard time getting excited about that. And like toasted stuff is just kind of hit or miss for me. Like I'm probably gonna try it, but I'm not losing sleep like I did over Bullet. In like a good way. Like go Bullet. Like strong work, guys. Like way to get over your terrible roots and make some good whiskey.
Dude, and I'm talking about makers too over the past couple of years. SE4 PR5. Which, by the way, figure out a freaking naming convention, makers. Like, do something. I don't know what you're thinking by naming it based on these stave profiles. It's exhausting, but it was so good. Yeah. Like, I cannot get over the fact that Maker's Mark, who did the exact same thing, for 40 years, is producing something that is this unique and this exciting. And if people would give it the chance, we might not hear about how everybody misses Weller in the next couple of years. Truthfully, it could overtake the market.
And I mean, I just wrapped up an article for Whiskey Raiders that Maker's Mark is coming for Weller's Lunge. All 4 of their cast strength, actually all 5. Yeah. I've only had 4 of the 5 from 2020 since they dropped 2005 in the first week of 2021. Okay, which makes no sense to me. But like $40 for a 54 to 56-ish ABV barrel proof wheated whiskey that's $40 you can buy all day is absolutely just super aggressive. And it's a great product. It used to be $60-65. They cut $20 off the top. You can buy it anywhere.
Thank God.
It's really good. Like 2020 was the year of me like standing kind of like on my shed, just being like, Maker's Mark, like, thank you. like you've been half asleep. Like you've been half asleep in the backyard for 40 years, but and you showed up to the Derby every year. But like, thanks for waking up and joining the rest of the crew. Like they're in the race, and that stuff is what gets me jazzed. When I've been asking for things over and over, just like flasks and agave. When I've been asking producers, like, sell your stuff in 200 milliliter flasks when I need to buy your $200 bottle. Like, and when they do it, it just gets me super pumped. Like Bullet, Maker's Mark, like all you agave producers using flasks, like my blood pressure's up, and it's because of you, and it's in a good way.
As soon as I found out that Peerless was putting out their bourbon and their rye in 200 ml flasks, I was like, this is perfect. I'll buy this all day long. It's really hard to justify paying $90 for a 2-year-old whiskey, but I'll pay
$30 a flask for the next 6 years until it's ready. I'll do it happily. And that's like my promise to the alcohol industry. And I've told every rep to listen. I'm like, is your product available in a flask or a small bottle? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, we'll get it in there and then I will buy it. Like, I don't care what it is. Like my promise to you is that if you put it in a small format bottling, I will buy it. And I will probably buy, if you do your entire range in small bottles, I will buy it. Like that, the power that gives the consumer is unbelievable. Like, give me small format offerings, and 100%, even if I didn't want to, I will buy it. Like, that is.
I would love to see what New Riff would do with a smaller sized bottle. Would they keep the same style for a 375? Or would they
I would
just
think like
totally?
they have a 50 mil that's
Yeah, they do.
the same bottle.
They do. I mean, I just wonder what that would look like. But, and I'm not trying to call out New Riff by any means, but, you know, I do feel like they are, you know, between them and Wilderness Trail, they could easily benefit from putting out a, you know, a pint-sized version
Sure.
of their products. But this kind of leads into what I was going to ask you next. Have there been, and I don't mean this because I love both New Riff and Wilderness Trail. Has there been anything for you recently that has been released that you have just been super disappointed by, or that might have? I mean, it doesn't even have to have been like a recent craft distillery. It could have been, you know, a product that had been hyped up for you and you just couldn't bring yourself to say, yeah, it's as good as everybody says it is. Maybe it's Blanton's. Maybe you've already answered this question, but but you know, in that camp, what's the one thing that stands out in your mind?
Yeah. So first off, too, like Backsetter Bourbon and Rye would have been perfect for a 375. Like
Yes,
super bizarre. Like
absolutely.
375. And
here's the thing, though. I love those products. I
love Backsetter Bourbon. Backsetter Rye tastes like cigarettes, and I'm not a cigarette.
Oh
guy.
yeah, okay, yeah. I actually can kind of get on board with that. It does have that
but the bourbon
ashy taste to it. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Anyways, for the thing, so I had just recently, and I'll counter this because people will say, "Yo, you hate Weller." Weller Craft Your Perfect Bourbon was not perfect in any way. It was the snooziest thing I've had in a long time. Like, I kind of just wanted to put it down and go to sleep. But I will counter that and say I'm not a Weller hater because Weller Full Proof is fucking amazing.
Yeah,
and they knocked it out of the park.
So
stop taking the stocks from Craft Your Perfect Bourbon because it's not perfect and no one can buy it anyways. Give me more Full Proof. The world will be better. That's my, like, I wasn't like super disappointed. I was just like, everyone says this is perfect, including Buffalo Trace. And I drank it and thought, like, it was so inoffensive. It was so soft. It was just so bland that, of course, no one could find a fault with it because it tastes like bourbon water.
You know what's weird? I have not yet gotten to try CYPP or the single barrel that came out last year.
Single barrel is great too. Like,
I mean, it never shows up here. I mean, I mean, part of that is definitely because it's Kentucky and everything gets so allocated that it automatically is in a raffle. But
sure,
both of those products, I've just not gotten to try yet, you know, and I've been fortunate to kind of fall into a couple of full proofs, but otherwise, like, it's not anything that I have been able to experience. And honestly, and you know, you have expressed a fairly positive opinion about single barrel, but you know, it's not something that I'm like bending over backwards to try to find samples of or
exactly.
even find bottles of. Like, again, that's such a big problem with the secondary market. I mean, like, I'm so discouraged in seeking out some of these bottles that could be beneficial for the podcast, or, you know, get us more listens or likes or reviews or whatever. But it's so hard to justify when somebody buys a $55 bottle of bourbon and puts it up for $325.
Oh yeah. I'm right there with you.
I cannot bring myself to say, got to do it for the content.
Got to do it for the pod, man.
Do it for the gram, bro.
Do it for the gram. I mean, and John and I are like that for Weekly Whiskey on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Like I'm thankful to get to buy a lot of whiskey for Whiskey Raiders, but even I'm like not looking to spend $300 on Weller. No. Like, it's not worth it. Like, I'm thankful to have friends, connections, hookups, stores that know me when I walk in and know not to mess with me. But like, I'm not paying $300 for Weller single barrel or $400 for full proof or Weller. Like, I don't know. There's so many better ways to generate content, especially too when the natural reaction is going to be like, and this happens every time on Reddit, new product release thread, 100 comments that are like, well, I'll never see it on the shelf anyways. I'm like, I get it. Like, we're all frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And that's been the big issue with, I feel like I read a comment that you wrote about this recently as well. And you definitely, just spoke to it, but yeah, Buffalo Trace needs to stop trying to appeal to the masses with new products and just put out the things that everybody wants or have been searching for over the past couple of years, even though it's not available. I mean,
yeah.
I think the last time that I walked into a store it was like, oh, you guys got a new Weller was like 3 years ago. Like, that's a long time for, them to not have the product readily available. I mean, the bourbon boom really set off in what, 2010, 2011 ish?
Yeah. It was full
maybe
swing by like 2015. I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. But like, that again, 4 years ago was 2017. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, I both had that moment like
the last year was a long
really?
one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Checks out.
Let's just totally give 2020 a pass and nobody ages for a year. We all get a skip for it. But anyway, I never walk into stores expecting there to be something special. Yeah. And when I do walk into stores where there's something special, they've marked it up exponentially. I went to a store yesterday that's 30 minutes south of where I live. And they had an E.H. Taylor single barrel sitting behind the counter.
This won't be good.
No, it's not. I was excited. I was like, oh, maybe they're actually going to have a good price on it. $150. Absolutely insane.
Wow. It's actually not the worst I've seen.
It's not, but I can't justify it.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
because that's a $60, $65 product, right? Yeah. At most. And they're asking over double that MSRP. I'm so over stores I think too, like, marking it up.
And like people always ask me like, hey, like, why should I care about the Our Bourbon single barrel program? And I'm like, A, first off, because like we all get to do it together. But B,
yeah, of course.
Like you're chasing George T. Stagg 40,000 bottles a year. Like you want limited, boom, 190 bottles of this, and it only goes to our community. So you know that like you are 100% always in the running to get one. And when you get it, everyone's going to open it up and talk about it. And there's only 190 of them. That is so much, like that's 2,000 times smaller if my math is right. I think so.
I'm terrible at math, so
I'm like
I said, I was an art kid.
Yeah, I mean, I should know this, but like 200 bottles compared to 40,000. Like, sure, we'll do 40 barrels this year, but like these are not like limited edition, and then 40,000 bottles that go to get marked up to $1,000 and like sit in collectors. And you got that one guy on Instagram that posts like, "Oh, I only got 14 this year, like sucky year," and everyone kind of like,
dude.
Everyone's just like throwing up the middle finger emoji. But like,
that's so obnoxious.
Like, find a different way to love bourbon. Like, we're not going to get Weller foolproof. And honestly, we're going to get like Wilderness Trail. Like there's so many amazing products. We'll just take the whole barrel. It's single barrel. It's barrel proof. It's just for us. And it's going to be not marked up because we don't mark anything up. And you have to pay a Patreon to get into the program. Like that to me, I'm like, okay, like complain about Weller 12 if you want, but this is so much cooler. And also you can afford it. And also you can probably buy it. So like,
of course.
So many people are ready to get down and like, and I get it too. Like people are disappointed in not seeing the products they want day in and day out, but like, let's fix it. Let's just have our own party. Yeah. We'll make it better. And we'll, every now and then people ask me like, when are we going to get a Weller foolproof barrel? And I'm like, well, I hope you're not like starting the clock because it's going to run for a while.
Please don't rest your laurels on whether or not we're going to pick the one thing that everybody's so in demand for.
I ask them, I'm like, I hope you're asking me because you have a connection. Otherwise this isn't happening. And they're like, oh, I don't know anyone at Buffalo Trace. And I'm like, well, it's going to be a long damn time.
I have like commentary videos I want to do for YouTube about things like Weller single barrel picks, foolproof, or do they actually do single barrel picks, like not foolproof, like just what they label with that orange label, single barrel?
I think I saw one or two, but I believe that they were very special. I have not seen like a mass Weller single barrel pick. They've been Weller foolproof barrels.
Yeah, of course. But just talking about and trying to elaborate on the insanity behind brand driven single barrels as opposed to product and quality single barrels that are coming out. And even comparing them to, this is such a like, you can get more bang for your buck if you go this way or another. But like, even comparing Knob Creek single barrel to Booker's, like Knob Creek single barrel is 8 times out of 10 probably gonna be a better product than what you get from a Booker's batch, which I hate to say because I love Booker's. I've been just a fan of Booker's for a long time, but still, Knob Creek single barrels are incredible. And they have been even since before they were, 12 to 15 years old, when they were 9 years old. And now that they're back to 9 years old, they're still solid. They're still so good.
And Booker's is going down, down, down while the price goes up, up, up. I mean, there was a point. There was like 2014, 2015, like Knob Creek single barrels were in a rough spot, but they were brand new. Like they were dialing them in.
Yeah.
Like 2016, I did 48 Knob Creek single barrels in 2017.
Holy moly. Jeez Louise.
I mean, and I like got some people involved. Like this was, we called it the Knob Creek rodeo.
I know, but still, that's like,
it took time.
I've heard people say they've done like, 20 or 25 single barrel picks in a year. 48's freaking ridiculous. That is so far above what I've heard.
But I mean, the consensus was like, I had people along for the first 12. I did like another 20 after that. And I racked up 10, like, and then people were like, holy shit, like you're doing this thing. Like, let me send you some. Yeah. I was like, okay, like let's keep this train rolling. Like I'll have no taste buds by December, but like, here we go. Like there was a couple that weren't like, where I was like, these are off the mark, but they're still for $43, really great bourbon. And when the goods were great, they were A+. And like,
yeah, absolutely.
At this point, people accuse me like, you own stock in Knob Creek. And I'm like, I don't, but like, I probably should have. Like, I should have done that years ago. But like, if you got $50 and you want a safe bet every time, go buy Knob Creek.
Yeah. Oh no, I 100% agree. My
store pick sticker or not, it's good.
My favorite barrel pick I've been on was my very first one, and it was Knob Creek. And we picked a barrel of bourbon. I kid you not. Was 12 and a half years old and came out at 121 proof.
That's great.
They added like a gallon of water to it to proof it down to 120. And even just that gallon of water allowed it to be what we all loved when we actually picked it. I mean, it blew my mind at how quality this single barrel was from the get-go. But then once it actually got bottled and it had to be proofed down, it was still amazing.
Yeah.
Like I wish I had the money to buy cases of it at the time. Like it sucks because it's so it's again what I was talking about earlier. Like I'm always going to be chasing that single barrel that, I love so much. And, one of the things that most people don't have an answer to, but I will ask from time to time about a Knob Creek single barrel is what did it come out of the barrel at proof wise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think that's much more indicative of what you're going to get in your glass than the age.
Sure.
I mean, like if somebody picks a single barrel and they're like, this is incredible, and it's really, really close to what it's actually going to be bottled at, then that's a winner. That is an absolute winner for me. But, and this was the fault that Buffalo Trace had for a long time, where you were trying everything at cast strength and it was going to be bottled at 90 proof.
Yeah. This would be so frustrating.
Like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing here? But they fixed it in 2020. So
that's the way to go. And we do a lot of selections now, but the only brand, they'll ask me, hey, how many of this do you want? And the blank check is always Knob Creek. And I'm like, you tell me how many Knob Creek you can get. And like,
Yeah.
we're done. If you can get 1, we'll do it. If you can get 6, we'll do it. If you can get any number between there, like we'll do it. Just like Knob Creek, I just love picking them every time. And I never get one that's too far away. Like our course marshal, no, the Holy Moly kind of spinoff was, I think, was the highest I've ever seen, and it was 126. So still really close. I've had some that were like 120.5, where like the attendant like takes their cup of water and just like splashes it and like, okay, it's good, you know. I love it. The whole Knob Creek to me is like a program and a portfolio, and I love the amount of information we get. Just speaks to like, if you're a peak bourbon nerd and also you don't want to spend $100 on a barrel pick, spend $43.99 on this Knob Creek. Like, boom.
Something's telling me we need to do a little collaboration pick.
Yeah, especially if you like Holy Moly.
I would be all about that. I don't know if, you know, what is Jim Beam doing right now with their single barrel program? Are you actually going there? Or are you only being sent samples?
It's remote right now. I should be there. I should be there later in the year, but right now I'm taking pretty much every remote kit I can get.
Well, let's maybe circle back to that sometime in the near future. But we have already hit like over an hour and a half.
We've been cruising. Holy
shit. We really have. Like, this is my favorite thing with you know, really casual interviews, is that it doesn't feel like it's been going for this long, and you know, we've gotten the chance to drink along together and enjoy each other's company. But I want to give you the opportunity to participate in our tips and bits segment, where we recommend things, and you know, it's not always bourbon related. I kind of prefer when it's not bourbon related, almost, because then we get to kind of flex on what we've been enjoying recently. But any tips and or bits for our listeners this week?
Oh man. I will say, if you like to be outside and you like to be warm while you're outside, the Solo stove seems like it's egregiously overpriced, but then you will buy one and you will use it and you will see that it's a very, very great piece of engineering. So my tip and bit would be to get rid of that cinder block fireplace, get a Solo stove if you don't like breathing smoke in through your eyes. We used ours for the first time last night. It was like 30 degrees in Wisconsin, so we did the only natural thing, and we had a fire and we sat outside for a while, and it was great. They are expensive. I have no promo code for you. I don't work for them, but super cool. And I was frankly blown away. And then, you know, sip some bourbon by the fire. That's, I think, a national pastime at this point.
One of my favorite things during quarantine or lockdown or the pandemic or whatever you want to associate it with is just getting to sit out on my back porch.
I love it.
And just breathe in the fresh air, you know, whether or not there's a fire. And we have not necessarily a fire pit, but a pit where we can, you know, have a controlled fire. But it just is so relaxing, and it kind of like resets everything too mentally, where you're just like, all right, I don't feel as bad about what's going on in the world. I don't know how you feel on a day-to-day basis, like anxiety wise, but you know, like I was fairly anxious within the first couple of months of the pandemic, where, you know, I needed that outside experience, or just the, you know, the fresh air to kind of calm myself down. So I'm really looking forward to when things warm up over here.
Yeah,
as well.
definitely. And for me, like I love my porch time. Like, I love to grill on the porch. I love to let my dog sniff in the backyard. For me, it's like a separation from work. Like, I'm really great from separating from my day job, but I do a lot of other things, and it's really easy to like clock out of my day job and then go right back into working on something else, you know, for like 8 more hours. I look up and it's 11 p.m. and I should be asleep. So like going to my porch, like sometimes I'll take my computer out there, but if I'm not on call, like, you know, no computer on the porch, like no work to be done, just like enjoy the fire, like breathe a little bit. Everything else will be there when you get back inside. But the porch is kind of like my like Zen zone.
That sounds so nice. I think I might actually have to go out on the porch and enjoy that after we're done recording here.
And that's and like, not to plug the stove again, like I love the Solo stove. It comes with a little stand. So like we have our fire pit like on our truck's porch. Like I'm not going out
Yeah.
into the boonies to get eaten by mosquitoes. You know, because I'm total suburban, like weekend warrior. Like once
Yeah,
I'm
of
on my
course.
porch, like I'm kicked back. Once I go back inside, it's back to work. But yeah, porch time's the best time.
I'll do a TV recommendation because I'm still, I'm
Oh
on
yeah,
the I feel like I'm on the early end of millennials where like we still had a pretty grounded relationship with television.
sure.
Like it's the people who are like, we love Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, DComs, of course. But we have found so much solace and peace in Escape to the Chateau on HGTV.
Oh, I love
Which
it.
it's incredible, man. So do you know anything about it?
No, I watched, I believe it was the sister show, which was Escape to the Country, which was British
Okay.
families moving to the country.
Yeah. So this is a British couple who bought a 19th century chateau in France.
Oh man,
And
sounds good.
it's like their multi-year long renovation journey
Okay.
as they're raising kids, and they're trying to use it as a wedding venue, and they're trying to move other members of their family in as well. And what's so satisfying about it too is that they're not that high strung feeling of American HGTV where it's like, we got plenty of cockroaches underneath the floorboards, or we got all them deer ticks that are hanging out or whatever. But it's like they see a problem and they're like, yeah, that's what life throws at you, and they deal with it and they move on. Like,
That's awesome.
and they laugh during it too. Like when we get upset about things, we're like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with this. This is going to be the worst thing. But they're like, I have to cut this root out of the ground, but I'm not going to be able to put a trampoline in it afterwards. Like it's great. It's so enjoyable and it's so relaxing. But what's funny too is like we're getting the condensed version on American HGTV.
Sure.
Whereas overseas, they're getting, basically like 6 or 7 seasons of it. Maybe I might be exaggerating on that. I apologize, but
Hefty.
but like as far as the American series goes, like we're on season 1 and episode 12 or 13, and it spans 5 years. So it's very fast paced.
I love it. I'll check it out.
Yeah, but you still feel very connected to the family as well. So a few weeks ago, I also started Listener Tips and Bits, and I totally just kind of forgot about it a couple of times. But this one comes from Eric Smith. And by the way, if you want to send in your listener tips and bits, it's at mybourbonpod or thisismybourbonshop@gmail.com. And we will listen to those. Not listen, we'll read them and we'll, respond to them here on the show. Anyway, Eric Smith said, "Hey, Tim Bip, I've got 2 listener tips and bits. Got to recommend an anime series that's on HBO Max right now, 91 Days. This is a show focusing on a dude who's trying to get revenge on the mafia for killing his family. The cool part is it takes place during Prohibition. It revolves around him secretly getting close to the mafia by helping them bootleg whiskey around Illinois. Not all anime is just, okay, excuse me. He says, listen, not all anime is just yelling and 50 episodes of a single fight. Look, I know I agree with you. I love Dragon Ball Z though. Like, I'll watch Dragon Ball Z on repeat, even though it is like 50 episodes of the same fight. And they're like, oh, it only is going to take 30 minutes for the planet to be destroyed. And you're like, yeah, but like you said that 18 episodes ago. What are we doing here, guy? Anyway, he said, number 2, don't be afraid to pair every bourbon you have with every little Debbie you can get your hands on. He did a pairing recently, and I apologize. I think it was like the double chocolate or something, little Debbie keg, and was like, what's the best bourbon that goes with it? And it turns out it was Jack Daniel's single barrel proof.
I'd totally ding dong with some JD SIPBP.
That's actually what I was just drinking right now too, just
So
to
good.
kind of cap off the night.
Huge fan.
But he said, "Thank you, Perry and Swan, for always keeping me entertained." And we appreciate everybody who is always listening to the show, sharing it around, corresponding with us. Of course, I have to now kind of transition my brain into host mode, apparently, as we wrap things up. Thank you all so much for listening this week. Jay, thank you so much for joining me as well. This has been so much fun. And I feel like we could honestly go for another 2 hours just chatting by ourselves. So maybe we'll have to do something in the future here as well.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. The time has flown by.
No kidding, man. No
when
kidding.
someone drops out and you need someone to burn a couple of hours, just let me know.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll chat local zeitgeist and get some more movie references under our belt.
It's nice to have that because every now and then something, happens and I'm like, oh, we need to pick it back up. I can't do this all on my own. But Jay, again, really, really so appreciative of you sitting down with me. Where can people find you on social media?
Likewise. Yeah. This has been great. If you are looking for me, I'm at Whiskey Raiders. So Instagram is at Whiskey Raiders, spelled RAIDERS. If you're looking for reviews, info, we usually get 3 to 4 whiskeys up a day. So quite a lot happening over on the site at whiskeyraiders.com. And if you're on Reddit looking for stuff like barrels or just want to say hi and tell me how terrible I did tonight, you can find me at u/t8ke. I have my own personal stuff, but Whiskey Raiders is the best way to get me. I'm on there all day long, sun up to sundown, and I'm on Reddit at Our Bourbon. So join us, use the search bar, read the rules, and then dive on in and get posting all your sweet goodness. But Perry, this has been an awesome time. Thanks for your time. Everyone out there, I hope the site is useful to you, and I've really enjoyed chatting.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much as well. And we'll put links to everything in the description of the episode as well. If you want to follow me, I am at PRaider1492 on all social media channels. If you want to follow the show itself, it's at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review on whatever podcatcher app you use. We typically use the Apple Podcast app to read those out here on the show. And if you do so, we really do appreciate it. It's a great way for us to grow the community. Search for bourbon on the podcast app. Usually we're like the 4th or 5th that comes up. So we appreciate everybody who is taking the time to do just that. You can find all of our apparel and merchandise at bourbonshop.threadless.com, including but not limited to, and I'm going to keep freaking pushing this until somebody buys one. We got skateboards up there. It was just kind of an unconscious decision. I was like, yeah, we're gonna add a skateboard to the shop as well. So go and check that out. If I don't see a sale by my birthday in August, I think Swan's gonna buy me a skateboard for my birthday. And let me tell you something. I'm not the guy to be trying out a skateboard. It's not my thing at all.
I the last time I rode a skateboard, I split my forehead open, but maybe this is the time to
you should talk to Swan about that then.
Okay.
Because that's not an uncommon thing that happened between the two of you. Anyway, you can also find This Is My Bourbon Drinking Glass, Glencairns, at whiskeyambitions.com. Thank you, Chad and Sarah from It's Bourbon Night. I almost said It's My Bourbon Podcast, which is not what we're called at all. But thank you to them for allowing us to throw that up over there. I go live every Thursday night on the YouTube channel for the podcast, youtube.com/This Is My Bourbon Podcast at 8 p.m. Eastern. Let's see what else. Questions or comments to This Is My Bourbon Shop at gmail.com. You can send us a voicemail for barrel rings, which is a very infrequent segment nowadays, but 859-428-8253. Once again, 859-428-8253. You leave us a voicemail over there and we'll listen to it on the podcast and respond to it accordingly. And then last but not least, patreon.com/My Bourbon Podcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can become a supporter of the show. At $5 a month, you get all of the bonus content, which includes the pregame chats and the last call, which come out respectively every Tuesday and Thursday of the week. That does it for this week's episode of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. Once again, everybody go follow Jay, go follow Take Reviews on social media. Jay, again, thank you so much, man. This has been so much fun.
Likewise. Have a good one. I appreciate the time, and I expect that I'll see you again soon.
I fully believe that. But we'll see you all next week for another episode. But until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.